Hello, welcome to Z Murray Design. Let's upcycle a pair of jeans into a unique purse. So let's get started. I first start by cutting off the hem of the pant leg on each of the pant legs. I measure up approximately 16 inches from the bottom, and I make a mark and I cut along that mark. And I do that on both of the pant legs. I put the top part of my pants aside for now, and I'm going to open that inner seam. I'm going to just cut along that seam so that my denim can lie flat and I can cut my pattern. My pattern measures 14.5 by 14.5, and I'm going to cut 2 of those. Next, I'm going to cut a 2 by 2 inch square from the bottom corner on each corner of the denim, and this is so we can box the purse in a later step. I cut that 2 inch square on the bottom corners on both of my denim panels. So now I have 2 denim panels and I have 2 lining panels from cotton fabric, and I just pieced mine together. You don't have to piece it though. Next, I'm going to create my bias strips from my upcycled quilt binding, and I'm doing mine in shades of green. You can use any color. My quilt binding measures 2.5 inches, but I'm going to cut these down to 1 inch strips because I'm going to use my 1/2 inch bias tape maker. So using my 1/2 inch bias tape maker, I'm going to take my 1 inch strip and I'm going to cut one end at an angle. That just makes it easier to feed through the bias tape maker. I'm going to use a pin to pull the fabric through until it comes out the other end of the bias tape maker. When it comes out, both of the raw edges are folding toward the center. And then I'll take my iron and I'll glide that along my strip of fabric. I will tilt my bias tape maker at an angle and I will glide my iron right along that bias tape maker, and when it comes out, both raw edges are folded toward the center. And this is what your bias tape will look like. So I need lots of strips, and I'm going to use my bias tape maker to make all of the strips. Next, I'm going to make the markings where I want to place my bias strips. I'll start in the center and then I will go out 2 inches, and my strips will be 2 inches apart. You can make your bias strips closer together or farther apart. And I'm placing them on the diagonal. So I have them marked going in one direction. I want to create a cross hatch pattern, so now I will make my markings going in the opposite direction. Again, marking them at 2 inch intervals. I now lay my bias strips along my markings in one direction, and then I will pin these in place. And when I go to the sewing machine, I'm going to sew right along the edge on both sides of my bias strips. Now that they are all pinned in place, I will sew down the edges, and you can sew with a straight stitch. I used a decorative stitch. Now I'm going to place my bias strips in the opposite direction, and I'm just wanting to make sure that my strips have a little hang over on the edge of each of these as I lay them down. Now, since these strips are on the bias, they have a little stretch to them. So when I take them to the sewing machine to sew them, I'm going to use my dual feed. You should use your dual feed or a walking foot so that they can feed in evenly. We will trim the overhang once everything has been sewn in place. I'll pin those in place and then to the machine. Now at the sewing machine, I am sewing with a jeans needle, and I'm using a decorative stitch, and I'm sewing right along that edge. You can see the decorative stitch. You can use a zigzag stitch or a straight stitch. When you're going over that center seam on the denim, just take your time and go really slow because it is kind of bulky there. And you'll sew down one side of your strip, and then you'll sew the other side. So I'm starting on my center strip. I sew that one first, and then I sew all of the strips to the left of that, and then I turn the bag and I sew all the strips to the right of the center. So now I'm sewing on the other side of the strip. Now all my strips have been sewn on. I'm going to turn my panel to the back, and I'm going to trim all of those strips that are hanging over the sides. And I'll do this on both of my panels. Now both of my panels have been complete. I'm going to move on to making the handles. Now on the jeans, on the upper part of the jeans, I'm going to remove those pockets, and I'm going to remove the label with my seam ripper. I cut up each of the center seams because I'm going to use the back part of the pant leg to create my handle. And my handle measures 5.5 wide by 24 inches long. Now you can also use a separate pair of jeans if you want a longer handle, or you can piece your handle from other scraps of denim. So I cut 2 pieces for the handle, and I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm going to press to find a center, and then I'm going to press that raw edge toward the center and press again, fold that other raw edge toward the center and press, and then I will fold everything in half and press, so all of my raw edges are now enclosed. I will clip all the way down, And then I'll take it to the sewing machine and I'll top stitch on both sides of the handle. And I'll do that for both handles. So now my handles have been top stitched. It's time to attach it to my panel. And now I'm going to find the center and I'm going to mark it. And then I'll fold that outer part to the center and I'll mark that. Fold the other side in and mark. And at the quarter marks is where I'm going to place my handle. I'll put a clip on those markings so I'll know where they are. Turn my handle back onto my panel and pin it in place. And then I will sew and do a basting stitch a 1/4 inch from the edge. So both of my handles have been attached to my purse. It's time to put the bag together with right sides facing. I'm going to clip all of my raw edges, making sure not to catch my handle in that side seam. Again, I'm going to pin my bottom seam. Matching up my raw edges, and then my other side seam. And I'll take this to the machine and I will sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance after I've pinned everything together. I'll sew my side seams and my bottom seams. I won't sew those corners just yet. So now that my seams have been sewn, I'm going to press all of those seams open. And it's on now to boxing the corner. So to box the corner, you're going to meet the bottom edge to the side, the bottom seam to the side seam. And you will clip that in place. And sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And do the same thing to the other side. Your bottom seam meets your side seam. And you're sewing 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now moving on to our lining, let's create 2 inner pockets. The pockets are going to measure 6.5 inches wide by 7.5 inches long, and you're going to cut 2 of those. And I'm going to put these right sides facing. And you will sew, but you'll leave an opening at the bottom about 2 inches, and you'll sew all the way around, leaving that opening at the bottom. And I just mark it just to remind myself to leave that opening for turning, making sure to back stitch at the beginning and the end. And you see I've left my opening for turning, but before I turn it right side out, I'm going to clip my corners on all 4 corners of each of the pockets. So when I turn it right side out, it'll be easier when I use my turning tool to push those corners out. So now that my pockets have been turned right side out, I'm going to give it a good press. And at the top of the pocket, opposite where the opening is, do a top stitch about 1/8 of an inch down from the top, and do that on both of your pockets. Now to place the pockets on your panel, I'm going to fold my panels in half and find that center line. I'm going to measure down 1.5 inches down from the top center for a magnetic snap, and I'll measure down 3 inches. That'll be for our pocket. Now I'm just marking that center line so I'll know where to place my pocket. Fold my pocket in half to find the center of the pocket, and where the top stitching is on the top of the pocket, you place it at that 3 inch mark, and pin it in place, making sure to center it. And do that on both of your panels, and you start at the top and you sew all the way down the side, the bottom, back up to the top, making sure to back stitch several times at those tops. And now your pockets are attached. Now let's insert our magnetic snap. So your magnetic snap comes in a set of 4. You have a mommy, a daddy, a brother, and a sister, and they each wear clothes. So now for your washer is what's going to be your pattern. It has a center hole and there's 2 slits on each side of that. That's where you're going to make your mark, in those 2 slits on each side of the center hole. That's where your prongs will be inserted. So on your interfacing, I'm using some Upcycle pieces of batting. I'm going to make those marks where those slits are, and then I'm going to make snips there on both of those pieces of interfacing. Don't make those slits too big because then your magnetic snap will be too loose. So just very small snips. Now on your panel, you're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to measure down one more time, down center 1.5 inches, and I'm just going to make a mark again because of that dark green fabric. I want to make sure I can see it. I'm going to take the washer and I'm going to place that center dot, that center hole right over my marking, and I'm going to mark those 2 slits on either side of the center hole of your washer. And then again, I'm going to make 2 very small snips. And I'll leave a link in the description so you can see this even closer, how to insert these magnetic snaps. I take 1/2 of my magnetic snap, I'm inserting it from the front so that the prongs come through the back on the wrong side of the fabric. Take a piece of your interfacing and put it over the prongs. Take a washer, put that over the prongs, and then press those prongs down. 1/2 of your magnetic snap is inserted. And you'll do the same thing on the other lining panel. Insert again from the front so that the prongs come through the wrong side of the fabric. And then place your interfacing. Now for this interfacing, you can also use a piece of your lining fabric. Just any small piece of cloth or interfacing or batting will do. Place your washer on top and press your prongs down. Your magnetic snap has been inserted. Now on our lining, we've inserted our magnetic snap. We have attached our pockets. Let's put this lining purse together. So we're going to put this lining fabric right sides facing. And we're going to pin on the side seam. I'm just making sure to match up my seams from where I've pieced my fabric. You're also going to pin your bottom seam, and you're going to pin the other side seam. Now on my bottom seam, I'm going to leave a 4 to 5 inch opening at the bottom so I can turn my bag right side out. And then I will stitch the side seam, and I will stitch from that opening. I will stitch out to the right, to the left, but I'll leave an opening at the bottom. You'll see in a minute here. Once I've stitched my bottom seam, you see my opening there. I'm going to press those seams open. Pressing these seams open just makes it easier to box your corners. And once again, you're going to match your bottom seam to your side seam and you pin it in place. If you'd like to see how I pieced this lining, just leave me a comment below and I can upload a video showing you how I piece this lining. Piecing your lining is a great way to use up your scrap fabrics. and then also a 1/2 inch seam allowance to box those corners. Now both of my corners are sewn together. I'm going to trim this back a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch seam, and do the same on your main body of your bag. Trim your boxed corner to a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just to reduce the bulk when you turn it right side out. I'll turn it right side out so you'll see what it looks like. And this is what the lining of the bag looks like, all sewn. But you still have your opening for turning. We won't close that just yet. Now in the next step, I'm going to turn that lining wrong side out, but I'm going to leave the main body of the bag right side out. I will insert the main body of the bag, making sure that your handles are down, and insert the main body of the bag inside the lining so that right sides are facing. The first thing that I'm going to do when I start pinning, I match my centers. So you know where your center marks are, and I'm gonna clip there. I'm going to match the other side. I'm going to match the center marks. And I'll clip there. Then I match my side seams, and I make sure that that seam allowance is open. That's one of the reasons that we pressed it open. Just helps to reduce the bulk when you're sewing it together. Match the other side seam and clip it in place. Next, I pin or clip at my handles just so that they don't shift around when I take it to the sewing machine, and they stay straight. And then I fill in the rest of my clips all the way around the bag. Now once everything is all clipped or pinned together, I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. So now that my bag is sewn together, I'm going to take my seam ripper and I'm going to take out those basting stitches of that 1/4 inch seam where we basted the handles to the main body of the bag, so that I can clip that handle to help reduce the bulk when I turn it right side out. So take those basting stitches out, and then I'm going to just trim off part of that handle. And you do the same thing to all 4 handles that we have sewn on. And now I'm going to turn the bag right side out. So through the opening in my lining, I'm going to just take my time and turn my bag right side out. Now once my bag has been turned right side out, I'm going to make sure that my boxed corners are pushed out on both the main body of the bag and the lining of the bag. I'm also going to check to make sure that my handles are still secure and that all parts of the top of the bag are sewn. If everything is intact, I will take it to the machine and I'm going to sew that opening closed, or you can sew it by hand if you like. Now that the main body of the lining of the bag, the opening has been sewn shut, I'm going to put that lining inside the main body of the bag. And we just have one more step and we'll be done. I'm going to press my lining so that it doesn't show on the main body of the bag. And then I'm going to give it a really good press. That's why we trimmed the top of those handles, to reduce the bulk when it's time to take it to the machine and you're going to do a top stitch. My top stitch is going to come down about a 1/2 inch from the top, and you can feel free to use a decorative stitch here if you like. I'm just going to increase my stitch length to 3.0 and I'm going to top stitch, and you're all done. So I hope you like this project and I hope you give it a try. Thanks for watching.